Caren, welcome to the Seasons of Living. On today's video, I'm going to show you how to make simple sauerkraut using cabbage and salt. And I'm also going to share with you a little Texas Hill Country sauerkraut history. The first thing we're going to talk about is the few supplies that you'll need to make sauerkraut. I recommend glass jars. The half gallon and the quart size canning jars that are wide mouth work great. You can also use a gallon size jar. And my favorite jar is a picklet jar. It has a little opening in the top that has a bubbler that you put in while you are fermenting, and the little float will fall when your ferment is finished. And then you just put this little plug in the top, and it has a clamp lid. You just put it in the refrigerator, and I find great success using these, and they're super convenient and easy. But any glass jar will work. If you really want to make a lot of sauerkraut, you might use something like this 4-gallon crock. A long time ago, people did not have the luxury of having fresh cabbage year-round, so they would preserve their cabbage crop by fermenting the cabbage into sauerkraut. I've told you before, I live in a German community. My husband's German, and I was talking to my mother-in-law about making sauerkraut, and she said that they would go into the field and glean what was left from the, that the farmers had left behind, and they would gather all the cabbages, and they would slice it with a salad master by hand and put it into crocks or to butter churns, and they would put a plate over the cabbage to weight it down and put a tea towel over it, and they would set it aside until it was fermented, and then they would put it in canning jars to store, because she said they needed their butter churns back for churning butter. If you decide to use wide mouth canning jars, I would recommend buying these lids that a bubbler fits down into, so when your ferment is finished, your float will fall, and you can just put a different lid on your jar and put it in the refrigerator. Super easy. I've used these for like 7 or 8 years. Some more things you'll need is you'll need some kind of glass weights to keep your sauerkraut submerged in the brine. These are from the floral department. They go in little vases to hold flowers, super inexpensive. Sometimes I buy at thrift stores things that had candles, that are made of glass. You can even use little glass cups and canning jars. I just wouldn't recommend using plastic. A canning funnel makes getting your sauerkraut in your jar super, tidy. And we're going to use pink Himalayan salt today, a wooden spoon and a sharp knife, a cutting board, and a large mixing bowl will make things really easy. I make ferments all the time, so I have this big bowl, and I use it almost daily. Of course, the star of the show is the cabbage. So we're going to make sauerkraut using these 3 heads of cabbage, and so let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is try to get a few of the large leaves off the outside of the cabbage before we cut it, because I like to fold them and put it on top of the sauerkraut, and then put the glass weight on top of the folded cabbage leaves. It really helps in keeping your sauerkraut submerged, and so let's try to peel off a few. We're going to half it first, and I like to cut my cabbage by hand. Of course, you can use a food processor, but I like to cut it by hand. I'm going to take just a little bit of the core out. We don't mind a lot of the white part of the cabbage. So next we've halved the cabbage, now we're going to quarter the cabbage. Of course, you can use a food processor if you want to. If I have classes, sometimes I'll use a food processor. But for myself, we usually just slice by hand. We have the cabbage cut up, so now we're ready to add the salt. The way I've been making sauerkraut for about the last 8 years is I usually put about 1 tablespoon of sea salt or Himalayan salt per head of cabbage. And that's just a medium head of cabbage. That's a good rule of thumb. I've been doing that for years and I've had great results. But if you want to weigh your cabbage, definitely do that. Just remember, for each pound, you'll need 2 teaspoons of sea salt. A good way to do that also is you can weigh your cabbage in grams and then multiply that number by 0.02, and that will give you the grams of salt that you need. It is very important that you use non-iodized salt. So make sure that you're using sea salt or pink Himalayan salt. Okay, there's 1 tablespoon. And 2. And 3. Okay, I usually let this sit for a few minutes. I'll stir it, kind of incorporate the salt a little, and then I'll just leave it and let it sit for a few minutes until I kind of see some of the liquid drawn out of the cabbage. So, and then we'll be back. I've left our shredded cabbage with Himalayan pink salt on it for about 30 minutes, and it looks like it's starting to produce some liquid. And I'm just going to kind of beat it with this wooden spoon a little bit. And sometimes I'll leave it up to 2 hours just sitting on the counter, and it's fine. Just cover it with a tea towel. I usually have to go run an errand or do a chore. I try to make my sauerkraut supply for the year because I grow cabbage, and we usually harvest the cabbage in March every year, and usually it'll last me almost the whole year. I'm gonna massage it just a little bit. You want plenty of salt, but not too much salt, because too much salt can hurt things also. Okay, so I think we'll start filling the jar. I think I'll fill the pickle-it jar first. I really love these jars, so I'm gonna take the little plug out. I always use a canning funnel, and it really helps if you use a casserole dish to put under your jar. So I put just a couple of handfuls in. And then I have this little pounder, and I just crush it down. Pound it down, or you also can use your wooden spoon. These are bamboo spoons, they're really inexpensive. Just press it down. You'll see more and more liquid. But I really try to, pack down the sauerkraut as tight as I can in the jar. Okay, I think I will stop right there. So I'm going to use my leaves and I'm going to fold them, because you want all the sauerkraut needs to stay submerged in the brine. That it needs an anaerobic environment, no oxygen. So just fold a few leaves. Usually this works great. I love this method. Okay, I think I will use my little glass pebbles from the floral department. Okay, so we're going to clamp the jar, and we're going to put there's a little bit of water in our bubbler. You've got to make sure that you stay below the inside tube. Okay, you put the lid on your bubbler and just put it in the top of your picklet jar. And within a few hours, this will float. Set this aside in a casserole dish for about a week. It's about usually when the float will drop in about a week. But you can continue to ferment. You just need to taste it. And if you want to keep fermenting and you want it to get more sour, then keep going. If not, I usually just take the bubbler out, put the plug in, and put it in the refrigerator. Okay, let's try a canning jar. Okay, we're just going to use the regular ring and lid. And you just don't want to tighten the lid down too tightly, just fingertip tight. And if the pressure builds up, the lid will let the gases escape. But just a little bit, fingertip. Okay, we're going to review the types of lids that you use on your sauerkraut jars. So if you use a picklet jar, it's a hinge jar that you clamp down. It has a place for a bubbler and the little float will rise. You put water in the bubbler, it'll rise, and when it is finished fermenting, the float will fall. You take the bubbler out and you put this plug in the little hole and you put it in your refrigerator. On this half-gallon jar with just a regular ring and lid, you just finger tight. You want to make sure that the gases that are escaping, you don't want your jar to have a lot of pressure. Or if you do want to tighten down your lid, just daily you should loosen the ring and let the air escape. That works also. So a good place to start with this. If you have this type of lid on your mason jar that has a lid with a place to hold a bubbler, then you will, these have not started floating yet because we just make the sauerkraut. But there's water in the bubbler, the float will rise while it's fermenting and releasing the gases, and when it's finished fermenting, the float will fall. And that's when I usually take the bubbler out and replace it with a plug and put it in the refrigerator. Same goes for this picklet jar. So there's a lot of different, methods and ways, that you can make sauerkraut. But probably, the most inexpensive is just to use a mason jar with a lid and a ring. And of course you want to pack your sauerkraut, make sure it stays below the brine so it won't mold. And then daily just loosen your lid and just finger touch tight. So I hope this helps. People get confused on this part, and I want to make sure that you're very clear on how easy this is. Jar that has been fermenting for 2 days, I want to show you the way that it looks, the color, and you see a little bit of white foaming, and don't worry about that. That is completely normal. The cabbage is starting to change from a green to kind of a whitish color. It looks like it's coming along nicely. If you see it floating inside the bubbler, that's a good sign. If you don't see inside your bubbler the floating, then you need to go check your seals and maybe redo your jar a little bit. But this one looks nice. It's coming along real well. 2 days, probably depending on your ambient temperature, but the warmer the faster. And I usually don't continue, feel free. There is no too long or too short a time, but somewhere starting at 3 days, you can start eating the sauerkraut. I usually go to about a week and then refrigerate, but you can keep letting it ferment even longer than 1 week. Sauerkraut has lots of vitamin C and lots of probiotics. So we try to eat a little bit of sauerkraut daily. Just about a tablespoon is all you need. I make my sauerkraut without any caraway seed or any kind of flavorings because I like to make a lot of dishes and just take the plain sauerkraut to make the dishes. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what to do with the sauerkraut, some ways that I use it. One of our favorite ways is we make a lot of ramen and we put sauerkraut in our ramen, which is super healthy with the bone broth. I put it on Reuben sandwiches. We have sausage, sauerkraut, and potato salad. And then a lot of times in the summer, I'll take just the plain sauerkraut and add carrots and apples and make like a slaw and maybe some onions and green pepper. So it's really delicious, and you can even put a little dressing on that. So there's a few ways to eat sauerkraut, but if you just make it plain, then your whole family, they can choose the way that they would like to eat it, because some of the kids like to put the really hot like kimchi sauce, and other of the kids just want plain. So if you'll just make it plain, then you can turn it into something later. I hope I've inspired you to make sauerkraut today. The ingredients and equipment are readily available to everyone, and sauerkraut is a great beginning recipe into fermentation. Please subscribe to our channel for more on farmstead living. From our Texas Hill Country to you, have a blessed day and see you soon. Bye-bye.